On April 15th, Tamil Nadu Chief Minister MK Stalin made a big announcement in the State Assembly. It was about the formation of a panel to protect states' autonomy. The committee, headed by former Supreme Court Judge Justice Kurian Joseph, has been tasked to suggest ways to protect the genuine rights of the states guaranteed in the Indian Constitution. The panel is expected to submit its interim report in January 2026 and the final report in 2028. Non-BJP ruled states have been complaining about the center taking away their legitimate rights for a long time. With the formation of this panel, Tamil Nadu once again aims to take the lead role in the fight against the center. But remember, Tamil Nadu formed a similar panel in 1969 when Stalin's father M. Karunanidhi was the Chief Minister. Headed by former Chief Justice of Madras High Court, Dr. P.V. Rajamannar, the panel submitted its report to Karunanidhi on May 27, 1971. What was the aim of the Rajamannar panel? Did it achieve its objectives? Did it help DMK politically? What are the changes it brought to the center-state relationship? Are there any similarities between Rajamannar panel and Kurian Joseph panel? Let's talk to biographer, writer and political commentator R Kannan to get answers to these questions. Welcome, Mr. Kannan, to this special interview. Basically, sir, Chief Minister MK Stalin recently formed a committee to protect the state autonomy. So, do you think Stalin got this idea from his father and former Chief Minister M. Karunanidhi?
I think state autonomy has been a very dear subject for his father while he lived. And it has been the party's dogma since it gave up the idea of separation in 1962. Earlier, state autonomy was not, it considered state autonomy as something very small. In fact, in 1958, the DMK's founder, Annadurai, compared it to mouse hunting. It's like hunting a mouse, whereas their desire for independence, for separation, he compared it to hunting a tiger, going on a tiger hunt. The idea originally belongs to Tamil Kazhagham's leader, MP Sivanyanam, Mapo Sivanyanam, who originally proposed the idea in 1945, where he spoke of Tamil nationalism within a united Indian framework. But the DMK despised this idea because until 62, it was seeking severance from the Indian Union. But then 62, with the 16th Amendment staring in their face, the DMK leader had a very difficult choice. They should either go underground and then continue to keep up the separatist ideology, or they should surface. They should come to the surface and then give up their separatist plank, because the 16th Amendment to the Constitution proscribed any secessionist advocacy, and it required any candidate who was running for office to swear that they will abide by the Indian Constitution and will honor and preserve and endeavor to preserve India's territorial integrity. So this is an old theme. So when they gave up separation, they then embraced the very MP Sivanyanam's theology of state autonomy, which Anna had earlier compared as mouse hunting. Now it was all right for them. So they settled for something less. But even that had not become possible. So when the DMK came to power in 1967, in 1968, MP Sivanyanam, the Tamil Kazhagham leader, had a conference on state autonomy in Madras, in which the Chief Minister C N Annadurai was the major speaker, where Chief Minister Annadurai said, except defense, except the subject of defense, the central government should give away its responsibilities to the states, legislative responsibilities, and its burden onto the states, and should willingly accept the powers and rights that the states would actually kick upstairs to the center. That is what he said. This was in 1968. In 1969, Anna passes away and Kalaignar Karunanidhi succeeds him. Now, it was Kalaignar Karunanidhi who will take it to the next step. So on March 19, he goes to 1969, he goes to Delhi, his first visit as chief minister. And there's a huge press conference. There were 50 newsmen, which was a sizable, substantial press conference, where he says that the central government should unburden itself. And it shouldn't consider devolving these rights as surrender, but it should consider it as lessening its burden. And then, empowering the states. This was March 19th, 1969, and he speaks about state autonomy and his desire to explore this idea further. I think in August 19th, 1969, he announces the Rajamannar Committee. In India's constitutional history, this is the one committee, this is the committee which is one of its kind. No other state has ever formed a committee of this sort. So that is where this difficulty arises. State autonomy has been a pet theme for the DMK, not for anybody else. You understand?
Yes.
So in 1977, the Jyoti Basu government came up with a memorandum on center-state relations. So Kalaignar Karunanidhi was far advanced. The only competitor for him in 1969 were the Akalis. They were emerging, asking for similar things. And in 1974, this was in 1969 when he announces the Rajamannar Committee. 5 years later, the Akalis skew the idea. They come up with the Anandpur Sahib resolution, which is seen by the center as tantamount to almost seeking secession, because they want their own flag, they want their own state constitution. It really goes all the way minus separation, right? Because this was their idea of preserving their identity. And in 1969, after the committee was formed, the committee comes up with its report, Rajamannar Committee, in 1971. Once the report is received, Kalaignar Karunanidhi's government sends it to the Prime Minister, who acknowledges it and says she will consult fellow chief ministers, and she reminds Chief Minister Karunanidhi that there had been recommendations from the Administrative Reforms Commission that the central government had already appointed. In 1966, the first Administrative Reforms Commission came up with its report. But that consultations, we don't know when it happened, what happened. Then it sort of died a slow death. So in 1974, 71, the report was out. 1974, I think April 16th, if I'm not mistaken, Kalaignar Karunanidhi introduces a resolution on state autonomy. It was an epochal moment. And there's a fierce debate within the assembly where even the AIDMK people are against it, okay? And the Congress, of course, is viscerally opposed to the idea because they see a red flag. They say this is tantamount to, this is separatism in a different garb. It's concealed separatism. So 74, the resolution is passed. This is again a historical moment because no other state legislature had passed this. 1974, the resolution is passed. And the speech that Kalaignar Karunanidhi offered, the debate is very, very rich. You can go and read it up. And in both the houses, we had a second house as well.
Yeah.
We had a legislative council as well. So what did the Rajamannar Committee actually say? The Rajamannar Committee came up with very fundamental changes. it asked more than 21 subjects from the concurrent list to be transferred to the state list. It saw high courts as the ultimate arbiter for any civil and criminal cases. So no case from a state will reach the Supreme Court. The state high court will be the ultimate arbiter. The Supreme Court will serve as a constitutional court. So no matters of civil jurisprudence, no matters of criminal jurisprudence will go to the Supreme Court. Then All India services, the recommendation was that no new All India services should be created. The existing All India services should be filled by both the central civil service exams plus gazetted officers from the state cadre. Okay? But more fundamentally, it asked for corporation tax, corporate taxes, capital taxes, excise duties, and cesses to be shared. Now they are not shared. They are in the central pool. So there would have been a lot of money coming into the state's hands because Kalaignar Karunanidhi and his predecessor Annadurai had all made this point that the state administration, the state government, is the closest to the common man. Yeah. The central government is up there, far distant. Okay? It's a notional government. It has no real contact with the masses, with the man on the street. Okay? So the state government should be endowed with these responsibilities. And there were further recommendations, many other recommendations, like the governor, the appointment of the governor should be done in consultation with the chief minister. And so on. And more importantly, you see, this is a recommendation that comes out in 1971. Rajamannar calls for the abolition of Article 356, which calls for the dismissal of the state government when law and order breaks down or when the constitutional machinery breaks down. Okay. Until 1994, we had very many difficulties. In 5 years' time, the very same article would be used to dismiss Kalaignar Karunanidhi's government.
Correct.
Okay. So it was almost deja vu.
Yes.
Okay. So this had come to pass.
The link language should be English. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, but despite all this, this got Kalaignar Karunanidhi into trouble because he made references to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and so on. And some of his followers called him the South India's Sheikh Mujib. Okay, there were posters, there were banners, there were references to this effect, things that really rattled Delhi. They didn't like this because this man, this party, his followers were making a lot of noise. They were very uncomfortable. And Indira Gandhi's response was, she always saw that this was not a very constructive demand. She said, if Coimbatore wants more revenue or more powers, how would the other regions feel? Things like this. Okay, so she said, our nation is so diverse and the current constitutional arrangements are all right. You see, she was very, very, very scared of the Akali Akali demands because they grew up they got steam. They became very powerful, and over a period of time, Punjab became an issue. Okay. So she didn't look at this very favorably. And her lieutenants here, her Congress lieutenants here, dreaded this idea from the DMK because they thought that this was originally a separatist party, and now it speaks of a reformed version of separatism. So if you were to devolve these powers, then that would be the beginning of the end of the idea of India. So this was what had happened until 1975-76. Then the emergency intervened. And after that, you had MGR's rise here. But you wouldn't believe it. It is not Karunanidhi's demand that led to Indira Gandhi setting up the Sarkaria Commission in 1983 to look into center-state relations. It was actually that year, around March 1983, if I'm not mistaken, Ramakrishna Hegde, who was Karnataka's chief minister, convenes a conclave of southern chief ministers. So N.T. Rama Rao from Andhra Pradesh, undivided Andhra Pradesh, M.G. Ramachandran from Tamil Nadu, I think Kerala's chief minister was also there. And the DMK chief minister from Pondicherry, D. Ramachandran, was also present. But that particular conclave came up with proposals seeking more fiscal autonomy, the ability for states to raise more taxes, to be able to share the central pool, the taxes that were allocated to the central pool. They were resource starved. Even today, we hear states complaining that they don't have enough resources.
Correct.
So that was the main agenda. It was not asking for a lot of political, it wasn't asking for major constitutional changes. It was a very watered down version of the regional autonomy that the Rajamannar committee had put forward. Rajamannar committee asked for almost everything under the sun.
Correct.
Okay, minus separatism within the unitary framework. And it even suggested that only the major issues like currency, foreign affairs, defense, those sort of
industries.
things. Those should be. And industries up to 100 crores should be left to, licenses for industries up to 100 crores should be left to the state.
Correct.
It even suggested, I think if I'm not mistaken, income tax as divisible, as shared between the states and so on and so forth. And then there was no GST then. So there was a state sales tax at that point.
Yeah.
Something that we don't have now.
Correct.
So after the conclave in Bangalore, a month later, Indira Gandhi announced the Sarkaria Commission on Center-State Relations. The Sarkaria Commission came up with its recommendations in 1988. It took 5 years. Now, you may recall, this is the same Sarkaria who actually inquired into allegations of Kalaignar Karunanidhi's corrupt deeds and his cabinet members' corrupt deeds. Okay. So it is the same Sarkaria who went to do the Center-State Relations report. That report spoke of a number of, changes. It mentioned that it disagreed with some of the recommendations of the Rajamannar committee. It agreed on fiscal autonomy, decentralization to some extent, but mostly on the abolition of Article 356. It said it should be sparingly used.
Yeah.
Okay. So it came up with a number of recommendations, but it fundamentally, they were very watered down. None of those recommendations really, except for a very few, most of these recommendations were left to wither and die.
Yeah.
So this was in 1988. 83, the Sarkaria Commission was formed. 5 years later, it tables its report. So it also dies a slow death. Then the next move is when the DMK is in power with the BJP's first administration under Vajpayee. In 2002, the Vajpayee administration sets up the Venkatachallaya Committee. The committee is tasked with looking at the workings of the Constitution. How has the Constitution fared so far? And that committee comes up with very many recommendations. For instance, it speaks about 6 months, within 6 months, the president should come up with assent for a state legislation or should communicate it as to why he or she would not be able to give it. It speaks about a 3-month period, if I'm not mistaken, for the governor. Things that were decided by the Supreme Court recently. This was in 2002. Okay. Now, a fundamental idea proposed by the original Rajamannar committee was the Interstate Council. This was a brilliant idea. But this was also an idea that the Administrative Reforms Commission had already spoken of. So it was only an echo. And that council, with the Prime Minister and all the chief ministers and several others, would have been a forum to discuss and reach consensus on issues which have a bearing on the states' rights. Okay. So in 1990, that objective was achieved during the VP Singh government by Kalaignar Karunanidhi. That was the first time that they were in a coalition government at the center. Yeah. Because in 1970, soon after his announcement of the Rajamannar committee, at the conference in Trichy, Kalaignar Karunanidhi came up with 5 proclamations. They were called in Tamil, Aimperum Muzhakkangal. And one of them, the most important of all, is Manalathil Suyatchi, Mattiyil Kootatchi. regional autonomy, state autonomy, coalition at the center, self-rule here. So that is why they never wanted to accommodate any of their allies in the government here. So it will be them ruling. But in the center, they envisaged a sharing of powers. So, and in 1990, that happened. It was a pretty weak government under Mr. Singh. The DMK, which had no representation in parliament in the lower house, was accommodated. And it was then, because they had referred to it in the Common Minimum Program, in the National Front Election Manifesto, etc. So the Interstate Council was finally formed. And it was supposed to be the place where the states had their say. Now, 1990 it was formed. Today we are in 2025. 35 years have gone by. The Interstate Council is supposed to meet thrice every year. It has met only 12 times so far. And after this centralizing administration had taken over in the last 10 plus years, I think it has barely met once or twice. Okay, because we have a very centralized notion of administration here. So after the Venkatachalaya Commission came up with its report, Sarkaria was a member in that commission, Venkatachalaya Commission. After that, in the second iteration of the BJP, in the UPA administration, where the DMK was a member, in the second Manmohan Singh government, in 2007, Madan Mohan Punchi committee was appointed. He was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And that commission disagreed with the Rajamannar committee recommendations in a major way. It said the Rajamannar committee it submitted its report in 2010, 3 years later. And Punchi said the Rajamannar committee had missed the plot. The idea is the framers of the constitution were actually putting together this document soon after India was partitioned. Their concern was a strong center to keep India united, whereas Rajamannar was recommending very strong states. This is what Punchi said. And the DMK was part of the government then in 2010. So this is the long and short of the DMK's state autonomy. The Rajamannar committee followed an American model of devolution and federalism, where the states have a huge say. There are similarities and dissimilarities. You're expecting elections in about a year. So it is also setting the narrative. He thinks of himself as the prime mover of that decision.